When one partner in a relationship comes to rely excessively on the other for their own sense of worth, identity, and emotional well-being, the codependent partner develops a complicated pattern of behavior and emotional dependency. Codependent people put the wants and needs of others ahead of their own, even if it means sacrificing their own satisfaction. It's possible they have issues with self-esteem, difficulty being aggressive, and a severe aversion to abandonment and rejection. Their sense of value is tied to how well they perform in the eyes of others, which can cause them to worry and feel inadequate. Codependency can lead to a destructive pattern of one person constantly taking care of and relying on another. A person who is codependent may become so wrapped up in their relationship that they neglect their own wants and needs in favor of those of their spouse. They may try to regulate their partner's feelings and problems by being overly caring. This dynamic has the potential to boost the codependent's self-esteem by giving them a sense of control and power. But the effects of codependence are negative for both people involved. As a result of their continuous selflessness, the codependent may begin to feel exhausted, confined, and resentful. They could feel anxious, depressed, and like they've lost their identity. On the other hand, the partner's reliance on the codependent for emotional support and problem-solving may stifle their own development and sense of autonomy. Codependency is characterized by an inability to set and enforce healthy boundaries. It can stifle the growth of an individual's sense of self, their pursuit of their passions, and the formation of satisfying relationships outside of the codependent relationship. As time goes on, it can cause anger, emotional tiredness, and eventually the end of the relationship if trust is not rebuilt. Codependency affects more than just personal relationships. It can have far-reaching consequences because they have difficulty saying no and establishing healthy boundaries. Codependent people often take on too much in their personal, professional, and social life. They may be unhappy and unfulfilled because they have trouble communicating their needs and wants. Codependency is not a recognized mental health disorder and is therefore not included in the DSM-5. However, it is acknowledged as a major problem that can have major effects on people and their relationships. It can be helpful to work with therapists or counselors who have expertise in codependency to identify and overcome destructive patterns and get insight into what is driving one's behavior. In this book, I will be taking you on a journey to overcoming codependency. Chapter 1. A brief introduction to codependency. Codependency is a trait with a wide range of root causes. To get to the bottom of it, we need to investigate where it comes from and the complex network of behaviors that surround it. Codependency's roots can be traced back to formative events, such as being raised in a dysfunctional family or being subjected to bad parenting. The emotional climate fostered by these formative experiences can teach one to put the needs of others ahead of one's own. Codependency is characterized by a preoccupation with the needs and wants of others to the exclusion of one's own. Codependents frequently have a strong desire to be liked by those around them. They use this need for external validation to help them feel good about themselves. They usually have trouble saying no and standing up for themselves because they worry about the consequences. Codependents have an unhealthy predilection for relying on others for their own feeling of worth and affirmation. As a result, they may become emotionally dependent on others and lose sight of who they are as unique individuals as they grow entangled in their relationships. People who are codependent take on the emotional and physical well-being of others. It's possible that they'll put their own mental and physical well-being at risk in an effort to help others. This pattern of self-neglect can originate from the deeply held notion that one's value is tied to one's capacity to provide for and save the lives of others. An intense fear of rejection and abandonment is often at the root of codependency. Because of this anxiety, codependents will often sacrifice their own wants and needs for the sake of keeping the peace in their relationships. Codependents may continue to put up with abusive relationships because they are afraid of being alone. Codependency is a complex problem that manifests itself in many ways. Codependents may experience an overwhelming need to manage other people's emotions and behaviors because they believe that doing so would provide them with a sense of safety and stability. Micromanagement, excessive criticism, and giving unsolicited counsel are all symptoms of a craving for control. However, the underlying dread of chaos and the desperate need to avoid emotions of powerlessness are frequently the driving forces behind such behavior. It's common for codependents to have trouble communicating their own feelings and needs. They may have been raised in a hostile environment and may have learned to repress their emotions as a defense mechanism. Therefore, codependents may have difficulty understanding themselves and expressing their needs and boundaries. Codependents may also experience difficulties with a weakened sense of self and a lack of personal fulfillment. Their preoccupation with pleasing others leaves them with little time or energy for developing their own interests. Because they have grown accustomed to viewing the world through the eyes of others, it is possible that they can lose touch with their own needs, wants, and aspirations. Codependents may also struggle to regulate their own emotions and form constructive coping strategies. In order to cope with their own emotional distress or to repress their own needs, they may resort to unhealthy behaviors like excessive caregiving, substance misuse, or other sorts of self-destructive practices. These unhealthy coping mechanisms can keep one stuck in a vicious cycle of reliance. Recovery from codependency is possible, despite how deeply established the condition may be. Individuals can begin to liberate themselves from codependency through counseling, self-reflection, and a dedication to personal progress. Along the way, you'll learn to value yourself more, set appropriate boundaries, show yourself compassion, and build resilience. The influence of codependency on mental health. The mental health of a codependent gradually declines over time. They were down emotionally because they can't get away from their partner's demands, and they can't give in to their own. As their own requirements are ignored, feelings of resentment, wrath, and frustration develop. They may feel unworthy of a healthy relationship or dread being abandoned, both of which keep them stuck in the cycle. Stress, anxiety, and despair are all symptoms that could plague a codependent person over time. They may experience loneliness and confusion as they learn to put their partner's needs above their own. Loss of self-identity and a weakened sense of self can result from a lack of healthy boundaries and a persistent focus on others. Recognizing and accepting one's own patterns of codependent behavior is crucial for breaking the cycle of codependency and regaining emotional health. Seeking out a therapist or joining a support group can give a secure environment in which to address these concerns and learn more effective means of dealing with them. Regaining one's emotional health and laying the groundwork for stronger relationships based on mutual respect and interdependence requires learning to create and maintain appropriate boundaries, nurturing self-esteem, and prioritizing self-care. The codependent person might progressively reclaim emotional control as they begin to recognize and confront their codependent habits. Strengthening one's sense of identity and value is essential on this path. Building a strong foundation of self-care and self-compassion begins with tending to one's own wants, needs, and passions. Developing strong boundaries is also crucial to escaping the trap of codependence. The codependent person can safeguard their emotional health and create a more balanced relationship dynamic by setting and communicating clear boundaries. You must develop the ability to say no when it is needed and acknowledge that your needs and desires are worthy of consideration. In order to overcome codependency, one must have patience, self-compassion, and perseverance. It may require overcoming irrational concerns and questioning deeply held convictions about one's own value. One of the most important steps in overcoming codependence is learning to communicate effectively. People who are able to communicate their wants, feelings, and boundaries to others in an open and aggressive way enjoy more fulfilling relationships. Codependent thought patterns and false ideas need to be rethought and tested as part of the recovery process. One strategy for doing so is to replace destructive, negative thinking with healthier, more positive ones. The codependent person can learn to appreciate himself independently of the approval or disapproval of others by cultivating self-awareness and self-compassion. The link between codependency and enabling behaviors. Enabling behaviors refers to acts that unintentionally encourage or assist someone else's destructive or unhealthy habits, typically out of a desire to maintain harmony, control, or avoid confrontation. When someone with codependency steps in to save their loved ones from the repercussions of their actions or destructive habits, they are engaging in enabling behaviors. This can take many forms, from accepting responsibility for their actions to offering justifications for their destructive behaviors. People who enable others do so out of a misguided belief that they are helping or saving the relationship when, in fact, they are merely contributing to a vicious cycle of dysfunction. Codependency and these enabling behaviors are linked because of an unhealthy cycle of dependency and control. As the enabler looks to the codependent for approval and meaning, the enabled person uses the codependent's efforts to shield themselves from the consequences of their own behavior. It's a vicious cycle. The enabling person becomes increasingly reliant on the codependent for support and protection from the repercussions of their actions, while the codependent gains a sense of worth from being wanted and affirmed. This is a destructive loop that benefits neither party in the long run. Feelings of bitterness, weariness, and a loss of one's own identity develop in the codependent as their sense of self gets more and more intertwined with the success of the enabled person. Meanwhile, the enabled person continues to engage in self-destructive behaviors since they are protected from the consequences of their actions that may otherwise spur them to change. The only way out of this harmful cycle is for the individual to become self-aware and make their own well-being a top priority. Codependency can be overcome by learning to set boundaries, value oneself, and take care of one's own needs. Each person must accept personal responsibility for their own actions and decisions, and this necessitates letting go of the impulse to manage or fix those around you. The enabled person, likewise, must accept the results of their actions. Not only should we be aware of the symbiotic relationship between codependence and enabling behaviors, but also of the negative results and lasting impacts that might result from engaging in such behavior. One person in the relationship becomes the caretaker or rescuer, while the other person gets dependent on them because of their codependency. Because of this dynamic, the enabled person may be unable to achieve independence, self-sufficiency, because they know their codependent will always be there to soften the blow of their harmful behavior. Codependence can have harmful long-term effects on both the dependent and the enabler. The codependent's self-esteem and sense of worth may continue to decline as they ignore their own wants and needs while always worrying about losing their partner. As their lives revolve around meeting the demands of the enabled person, they may suffer from burnout, emotional tiredness, and a loss of identity. The person who is enabled runs the risk of living a life without growth or responsibility. As they look outside themselves to fulfill their demands and shun personal accountability, they may experience negative emotions including guilt, shame, and low self-esteem. This can be detrimental to their growth as individuals. One of the most important parts of getting better is learning how to set and stick to appropriate boundaries. Part of this is being able to articulate your boundaries with confidence. To have better relationships, one must learn to say no without feeling guilty and to accept that it is not their obligation to fix or save others. Setting limits protects us from harm, fosters autonomy, and fosters respect for ourselves and others. The enabled person must cultivate a growth mindset that embraces the necessity of change. This requires recognizing self-destructive habits, accepting responsibility for their behavior, and making concerted efforts to find help in order to confront and resolve difficulties. They can eliminate their dependence on others and improve their lives by taking charge of their own actions. Chapter 2. Experiences that may contribute to codependency. There is a strong correlation between codependency, one's early life experiences, and the dynamics of one's family. During childhood, dependency habits can take root and continue to grow into adulthood. Codependency can develop, for example, when one sibling or parent is battling with substance abuse and the rest of the family takes on caregiving responsibilities to keep the household running. As a result of this dynamic, people may develop a strong sense of responsibility and put the needs of others ahead of their own. Neglect or emotional isolation in childhood has been linked to adult codependency. A kid may internalize the concept that their needs are unimportant or that they must earn their carer's love and approval by putting the needs of others before their own if they do not receive continuous affection, attention, and validation. The result might be an unhealthy preoccupation with ensuring approval from others and an irrational fear of being alone. Family entanglements can also be a source of fuel for codependency. When personal space is invaded by one's own family, a condition known as enmeshment exists. Children in such homes may find it difficult to form an independent sense of self because they are so invested in the success of their family unit. The inability to set boundaries, communicate needs, and keep one's own identity distinct might come from this merging of identities. Children may learn to repress their own wants, feelings, and desires in order to keep the peace in homes where open expression of feelings and emotions is discouraged or invalidated. This repression can manifest as an unhealthy preoccupation with the feelings of others and a strong need to satisfy and solve problems, even at the price of one's own happiness. Also, children can be profoundly affected by seeing their parents or primary carers engage in codependent behavior. Children internalize this behavior as the norm when they see one carer repeatedly putting the needs of the other before their own. This can lead them to unconsciously seek out further relationships where they can act out this destructive habit. Growing up in a family that does not accept or encourage the expression of vulnerability can also aid this behavior. When kids are often told their feelings don't matter or they're being silly, they could start to internalize that message and start hiding their emotions. This can set the stage for a lifetime of trying to prove one's value by taking care of others and trying to win their approval. Childhood traumas like physical, emotional, or sexual abuse can also set the stage for adult codependency. Those who have overcome abuse may have a skewed perception of their own value and believe they are not deserving of love and acceptance. To alleviate the emptiness they feel inside, they may seek out relationships in which they can once again provide care for another person. Codependency can also develop in families when there is a lack of emotional connection and appropriate communication. Individuals may acquire a fear of confrontation and a strong desire to avoid any sort of disagreement when open and honest communication is discouraged or punished within the family. As a result, they may repress their own feelings in an effort to maintain the peace. This avoidance of confrontation might cause one to become too sensitive to the feelings of others and to put their own needs second. Abuse of any kind, be it physical, mental, or sexual, can leave deep psychological wounds. It makes it hard for the victims to feel safe enough to trust others and set boundaries with them. Codependency can also develop as a result of emotional or physical neglect. An individual may internalize the concept that their value is tied to the caretaking or satisfying the needs of others if they spend much of their childhood feeling invisible, unheard, or unimportant. This tendency to put others' needs before their own can carry over into maturity, where the person becomes codependent. Not being exposed to healthy relationship dynamics and having positive role models might result in a generational cycle of codependency. Without a model of what a healthy, mutually supportive relationship looks like, people are more likely to unconsciously mimic the dysfunctional dynamics they witnessed in their own families. Self-awareness, self-compassion, and the cultivation of healthy coping skills are essential components of the holistic healing process necessary to overcome codependent tendencies. Individuals can progressively break free from the cycle of codependence and develop healthier, more balanced relationships by prioritizing their own needs, setting boundaries, and cultivating a strong sense of self. Identifying early negative experiences in order to break free from codependent behaviors. The first step to overcoming codependency is realizing and fixing childhood traumas. The ideas, attitudes, and behaviors we exhibit as adults are profoundly influenced by the traumas we experienced as children. We can take the first steps towards better relationships and a more satisfying life by recognizing and healing these pain. Self-examination and introspection is very important. If you want to learn how your childhood has shaped your present, you need to do so in an atmosphere of safety and acceptance. Spend some time being completely transparent about your upbringing and the bonds you established with adults. Think about how your identity and your perspective on relationships changed as a result of the experiences you had. Recognizing and embracing previous hurts helps you see how they influence your present actions and decisions. With this knowledge in hand, you may finally stop yourself from unconsciously repeating harmful codependent behaviors. That it's also important to understand that these scars are not your fault and were created when you were young and impressionable. Consulting an expert can also help. Therapists who focus on trauma, attachment, or codependency can be invaluable allies on the road to recovery. In therapy, you can feel free to express and work through your feelings, discover new perspectives, and learn effective ways to handle difficult situations. Self-care activities like journaling, mindfulness training, and meditation, spending time in nature, and connecting with like minds can be helpful. The ability to forgive others also greatly aids in recovery. Chapter 3. Codependency in Relationships. Codependency in romantic relationships can lead to a situation where one spouse takes on the role of the carer or rescuer, and the other partner takes on the role of the dependent or victim. The carer may feel obligated to help the other person and may put their own needs on the back burner. When both people in this relationship start to feel imprisoned by their roles, it can lead to a vicious cycle of enabling and destructive behavior. Codependency can also show in platonic relationships. When one friend takes on the role of primary source of emotional support for another, they risk becoming unduly invested in their lives. The former friend may gain a sense of accomplishment for being able to fulfill the other's requirements, while the latter develops an unhealthy need on their friend's approval. The codependent buddy may find it difficult to set clear boundaries and may put their friend's demands ahead of their own. Codependency among families can arise when one member takes on the role of caretaker or responsible party, frequently to the detriment of their own needs and development. Because of their concern for the welfare of their loved ones, this person may find themselves unable to make decisions for themselves. However, the cared for family member may learn to rely on the carer for anything from emotional support and validation to the final say in major life decisions. If not addressed, this can persist through the generations, stifling the family's ability to foster its members' healthy sense of self. Emotional manipulation, control, and an unhealthy desire for external validation and approval are common characteristics of codependent relationships. They can get in the way of people being themselves, communicating effectively, and resolving conflicts peacefully. Learning to put one's own wants and feelings first is an important step towards overcoming codependency and creating more fulfilling relationships. Part of this process is learning to be kind to oneself and accepting that one's value lies in more than just meeting the needs of others. Building a solid foundation of trust, respect, and open communication is essential in romantic relationships. Both people in a relationship need to learn to be self-sufficient, which means giving themselves and one another room to grow and develop in their own ways. To guarantee that each person's needs are met inside the relationship, it is important to set and stick to boundaries. Friendship requires a conscious effort to balance one's own wants with those of one's companions. It's crucial that partners help one another develop personally without being unduly dependent or entangled. Building a wide circle of friends is a great way to avoid leaning too heavily on any one person when you need emotional assistance. Redefining roles and confronting long-standing patterns within familial ties may be necessary to free oneself from codependency. Each member of the family can work to improve their sense of independence, establish healthy boundaries, and express their wants and needs to one another. Family counseling or therapy can be a great method for families to work through these issues, heal old wounds, and learn to communicate better. Relationships thrive when people are able to talk to one another. It's crucial that you learn to articulate your wants, feelings, and limits in a way that is clear and assertive. Remember that true communication is a two-way street, in which each person involved feels that they were heard and understood. In order to better understand others and strengthen bonds with them, active listening and empathy play crucial roles. Boundaries are also crucial for keeping relationships on a healthy. Each person needs to know their own limitations and be able to express them to those around them. When people treat one another with dignity and respect, they are less likely to engage in destructive behaviors like controlling or codependency. The demerits of nourishing codependent relationships. Keeping a codependent relationship going can have serious repercussions for both people involved. Such bonds may appear soothing at first because of the apparent mutual dependence and support they provide. Underneath the surface, however, they can cause a variety of issues that impede one's capacity for self-improvement, emotional wellness, and boundary formation. It's common for people in codependent relationships to become so entangled that they stop prioritizing their own wants, needs, and identities. They may put their partner's demands ahead of their own, which can lead to a lack of self-care and happiness. This can inhibit development and stop people from finding their own strengths, hobbies, and goals in life. The breakdown of appropriate boundaries is yet another effect of codependence. When people who battle with codependency are unable to establish and maintain healthy boundaries, they lose their sense of identity and become passive. Because of this, one partner may end up taking on the role of carer, while the other grows dangerously dependent. This type of dependence can lead to feelings of bitterness and resentment over time. Emotional instability can become a vicious cycle when codependency is present. This can develop due to unhealthy reliance on another person for one's sense of well-being and happiness in a relationship. Consequently, worry, uncertainty, and fear of abandonment can all be triggered by even the slightest change or disruption in the relationship. Why it's important to set boundaries in relationships. The first step to setting boundaries in relationships is learning to recognize and accept one's own needs, wants, values, and priorities. Gaining a deeper understanding of oneself enables people to more clearly express their wants and requirements to their loved ones. Learning to prioritize one's own needs and say no when necessary are also integral parts of boundary setting. This involves knowing one's own limits and refraining from going beyond them in an effort to appease or accommodate others. It's about making happiness and fulfillment a top priority in your life. Setting healthy boundaries relies heavily on open and honest communication. It entails making one's wants, needs, and constraints known in a way that is clear, honest, and empathic. Individuals can develop a more harmonious dynamic in their relationships by communicating their expectations and limits clearly to one another. When setting limits, it's important to be aware of and address enabling actions. Enabling behaviors are common among people who are codependent and include things like taking on the feelings and actions of others, protecting them from negative outcomes, and putting their own wants and needs on hold. Recognizing and redefining these activities can give people more control over their lives and foster more positive relationships. When people with codependency commit to setting and maintaining healthy boundaries and engaging in self-care, they begin a process of inner development. Setting and upholding appropriate limits requires constant introspection and reassessment on the part of the individual. It necessitates consistent introspection to determine whether or not one's limits are beneficial to oneself and one's relationships. There is a chance that people will push back or resist as they make strides towards more healthy boundaries and self-care. It is crucial that they continue to prioritize themselves despite any constraints or expectations from others. Setting explicit repercussions for those who consistently violate or disrespect one's boundaries may be necessary when standing up for oneself and prioritizing self-care. Chapter 4. Recovery from Codependency. Recovering from codependency is a life-changing process that calls for introspection, kindness towards oneself, and a dedication to developing one's full potential. Recognizing that your value as a human is independent of other people's opinions is crucial to recovering from codependency. The first step to breaking free is realizing that you deserve love, respect, and happiness just like everyone else. Increasing one's own sense of self-awareness is crucial during the healing process. To do this, you must look within yourself and examine the feelings, ideas, and ways of thinking that may be contributing to your codependent tendencies. This involves taking an introspective look at your wants, needs, and anxieties, as well as acknowledging the ways in which you have put others ahead of yourself. Cultivating self-compassion is essential as you move deeper into the healing process. This requires letting go of self-criticism. Establishing appropriate boundaries is also equally important. Building a solid sense of identity is another important part of recovering from codependency. Identifying and pursuing one's own values, interests, and passions, and devoting one's time and effort to those pursuits are all part of this process. Developing one's sense of self leads to more self-satisfaction and less need for external approval. It can be beneficial to reach out to reliable friends, family members, and experts for moral support while you work through the healing process. A safe place to work through feelings, gain perspective, and get advice from professionals who understand codependency and the dynamics of relationships is therapy, support groups, or counseling. Improved communication is a crucial part of the healing process. This includes not just learning how to listen attentively and empathize with others, but also how to express your own thoughts, feelings, and demands in a direct manner, reevaluating your network, and surrounding yourself with people who encourage your development and happiness may prove useful as you move forward. Self-forgiveness is also important. Recognizing and letting go of any grudges from the past is crucial to moving forward. When you forgive, you release the emotional weight of harboring resentment, but you do not condone the offending behavior. As your healing progresses, it's important to learn to love and accept yourself. Take care of yourself with love, compassion, and honor. Recognize your achievements. Give yourself credit when credit is due, and learn to accept and forgive yourself for your flaws. The path to independence from unhealthy dependencies and the establishment of genuine bonds with others begins with a strong and supportive relationship with oneself. One of the most important parts of getting better is surrounding oneself with positive people. Put yourself in the company of people who will respect your boundaries, help you develop, and cheer you on as you make your way to recovery. Therapy and codependency. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a popular treatment option for people battling with codependency. Individuals who engage in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, learn to identify and alter the faulty assumptions that sustain their codependency. Individuals can learn to set healthier boundaries in relationships, develop more effective coping mechanisms, and confront negative self-perceptions using CBT. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, has been shown to be effective in treating codependency. Mindfulness training helps people become more self-aware, accepting, and compassionate. Being present in the moment allows one to gain insight into their feelings, needs, and triggers. Meditation and other mindfulness practices help people learn to pay attention in the present moment and control their emotional responses. CBT is helpful in treating codependency because in order to understand how one's upbringing and unconscious tendencies may have contributed to codependency, the individual needs to go back in time. Through that, they can develop understanding of their unresolved emotional conflicts, attachment traumas, and its effects on current relationships. People battling with codependency also benefit greatly from group therapy and support groups. People can feel comfortable opening up about their lives, gaining insight from others, and receiving criticism in these types of groups. When done in a safe and supportive group setting, assertiveness training, interpersonal skill development, and boundary setting can all flourish. Codependency within family systems can be addressed effectively through family therapy. Family members are given the opportunity to examine the factors that contribute to codependency in the family, thereby fostering better communication and more satisfying relationships. Individuals in a family can benefit from family therapy because it allows them to gain a deeper understanding of one another's perspectives and vulnerabilities. Codependency recovery can benefit from a holistic approach that incorporates expressive therapies like art therapy, music therapy, or dance therapy. These practices offer people many avenues via which they can talk about their feelings, learn about themselves, and heal from emotional trauma. Couples therapy can be helpful for resolving codependent tendencies within romantic relationships in addition to solo therapy. Couples therapists aid couples in recognizing problematic patterns, learning to communicate more effectively, and setting boundaries. That it's important to remember that everyone's experience with recovering from codependency is different, and that no single method will work for everyone. Therapy calls for dedication, introspection, and a readiness to make changes. Chapter 5. Maintaining healthy relationships. Trust, respect, and open communication are the threads that hold together healthy relationships. Healthy relationships thrive in an atmosphere of mutual respect and acceptance, which allows each party in the relationship to develop to his or her full potential. Trust is the bedrock of healthy relationships. Trust develops gradually through dependable behavior, where promises are fulfilled and vulnerable people are treated with respect. When two people trust one another, each feels comfortable opening up about their hopes, dreams, and anxieties, knowing that they will be heard and respected. When two people are dependent on one another, they must treat one another with respect. Respect for one another entails appreciating and respecting each other's individuality, limits, and freedom. Partners show each other warmth and generosity, respecting one another's thoughts, feelings, and decisions. When people treat one another with respect, it creates an environment where they may be themselves without fear of judgment. The vitality of these relationships is sustained by open lines of communication. Partners facilitate communication, which paves the way for the friendly airing of issues, complaints, and even conflicts. Communicating helps people work out their differences, find common ground, and become closer to one another emotionally. Interdependence is celebrated in healthy relationships because each partner is seen as an independent being with their own set of hopes, desires, and interests. They are invested in each other's success because they know that happiness strengthens relationships. Partners share in one another's joy. In a healthy relationship, both people make an effort to empathize with one another, thereby validating one another's feelings. An atmosphere of emotional security and closeness can flourish when two people are able to empathize with one another. Giving and receiving characterizes strong, interdependent partnerships. Partners demonstrate a readiness to give and take, seeking out solutions that benefit both parties involved. They use a cooperative decision-making strategy that takes into account the priorities of both parties. When two people are truly committed to one another, they create an environment of unconditional love and acceptance. In a healthy relationship, both partners accept and value the other person for who they are, flaws and all. They accept one another's imperfections and flaws because they know that doing so strengthens their relationship. In these relationships, openness and trust play essential roles. Each partner feels safe disclosing their innermost thoughts and feelings to the other without worrying about repercussions. They make it safe to express one's true feelings. Healthy relationships also require a healthy dose of humor, playfulness, and laughter. Partners take pleasure in each other's company, taking part in shared activities and making happy memories together. They enjoy each other's company and work to maintain an attitude of humor that helps them deal with life's more serious challenges. Self-respect and love are also highly prized in interdependent partnerships that are healthy. Partners recognize the importance of prioritizing their own health and well-being and provide moral and emotional support when doing so. They each know that if they love themselves first, they can give their best to their partner. A sense of fairness and equality flourishes in environments where people are depending on one another. Partners consider each other to be of equal worth, listening to and responding to each other's ideas, feelings, and wants. There is harmony in the relationship because of the equitable distribution of power and the mutual nature of decision-making. Relationships that are mutually supportive encourage independence and autonomy. Each partner respects the other's right to a separate life outside of the relationship for the sake of self-development and mutual happiness. By maintaining healthy limits and encouraging each other's individual development, they are able to grow closer to one another over time. Forgiveness and letting go of grudges are crucial in healthy relationships. Partners are able to forgive one another and move on from the past rather than harboring anger because they recognize that mistakes and misunderstandings are inevitable in any relationship. Instead of holding grudges and hindering the relationship's progress, they put its health first. How to set and keep boundaries. In order to cultivate healthy relationships with others, it is crucial to establish clear boundaries. Boundaries help us guard our ideals and promote mutual regard because they operate as guidelines for our interactions with others. While there is no foolproof method for setting boundaries, there are general guidelines to follow. Setting healthy boundaries relies on one's own self-awareness. Knowing your own wants, values, boundaries, and triggers is essential. Consider your mental, emotional, and physical limits. Describe the kinds of actions or interactions that make you feel uneasy. Just what won't you settle for? When you have a firm grasp on these facets, you may more effectively convey them to your loved ones. Having frank and open conversations is essential. Express your limits in a courteous and logical way. Pick a time when you can expect open ears and willing participation from the other person. Express your feelings and desires without passing judgment or making accusations. Boundaries are there to keep you safe, not to make others feel restricted or controlled. Be accepting of others' needs and attentive to their expressions of boundary-setting needs. A happier and more balanced relationship can result from the two parties coming to an understanding and agreement on boundaries. Maintaining boundaries effectively requires constant consistency. After establishing them, be careful to adhere to them uniformly. When people are not used to certain constraints, they are more likely to test them. Reinforce your boundaries in a kind but firm way in such situations. Consequences should be ready to be implemented if necessary. Boundary flexibility is also important. Boundaries may need to be readjusted or renegotiated as relationships develop and situations alter. You should be willing to examine and reevaluate your boundaries on a regular basis to make sure they still serve your needs and reflect your values. Relationships that thrive on open dialogue and shared knowledge last. It's also crucial to remember that the nature and severity of boundaries change with each relationship and each person. Setting boundaries in a love relationship may be different than doing so with other people in your life. When setting boundaries, it's important to consider the specifics of each relationship. Boundaries and friendships assist, make sure each person involved feels valued and appreciated. Setting limits helps generate a healthy dynamic in which everyone's needs are taken into account and respected. Setting boundaries with family members might be difficult, but it's necessary to put your emotional health first and speak up for what you need. If particular dynamics in your family are frequently harmful to your mental or emotional health, it is okay to reduce the amount of time and effort you spend on them. Boundaries are important, but they should never be used to control or manipulate people. You shouldn't use them as a crutch to avoid feeling exposed or confronting the real problems in your relationships. Setting boundaries can help people feel safer talking to one another, more secure in their relationships, and more emotionally stable. Setting and maintaining boundaries is not always met with support or understanding. There will always be people who struggle to accept and comprehend your boundaries, and there will always be those who have different expectations and viewpoints. It's important to communicate with compassion and empathy even while standing strong on your boundaries. Conflict resolution methods. Healthy relationships rely on open lines of communication and the ability to resolve conflicts amicably. Communication is not just about talking to one another. It also involves listening to one another and understanding what the other person is saying. Listening attentively is the first and most important step. Listening actively means giving your spouse your undivided attention and considering what they say before responding or interrupting. You may show that you care about what they think and feel by listening carefully to them and responding appropriately. Expressing oneself clearly and confidently is also crucial to successful communication. The best way to avoid misunderstandings is to express your ideas, desires, and feelings clearly. Avoid placing blame or criticism on your partner by carefully selecting your words and focusing on I statements. This method establishes a safe space for open communication without hostility on either side. Nonverbal communication is crucial in getting points across. Conversations gain dimension and complexity when you focus on nonverbal cues like body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions. Effective nonverbal communication includes maintaining eye contact, utilizing open and relaxed gestures, and using a calm and courteous tone. Disputes are an inevitable part of any close relationship. It's important to take a positive tack while resolving conflicts. Taking a step back and looking at things from an outside perspective can be quite helpful. The disagreement can be contained if both parties refrain from making personal attacks and instead focus their attention on the matter at hand. It's also important to look for areas of agreement and try to reach a middle ground. Recognizing that each party brings a different set of experiences to the table facilitates the development of win-win strategies. Teamwork and the understanding that you are both contributing to a solution can flourish when people brainstorm and share ideas with one another. Emotional control is crucial during conflict situations. The intensity of one's emotions might obscure one's judgment and make it difficult to communicate clearly. Taking a breather to calm down and gather your thoughts before continuing the talk will help avoid any more miscommunication. Establishing a level of trust is also important for successful conversation. Without trust, it's difficult for two people to communicate openly and freely. A trustworthy partner is one who is dependable, keeps their word, and protects their partner's privacy. Conversations built on trust can be more honest and open, leading to closer bonds and easier problem solving. Self-awareness is also crucial to good communication. Better communication with your partner might result from learning more about your own emotions, triggers, and communication styles. If you are aware of your own prejudices or defensive behaviors, you can work to overcome them and enter into conversations with a more receptive frame of mind. Empathy is also helpful. Having empathy means trying to see things from your companion's point of view and feeling what they feel. Recognizing and respecting their emotions, even if you don't agree with them, fosters a safe environment for open conversation. Keep in mind that validation is not the same thing as agreement, but rather a demonstration of interest in and concern for your partner's feelings and perspectives. Effective communication can also be considerably aided by developing an attitude of genuine inquiry and interest in your conversational partner's thoughts and viewpoints. Conflicts can be resolved and relationships strengthened when people make an effort to comprehend one other's perspectives, ask questions to explain their points of view, and work to identify the feelings and needs that lie beyond the surface of their words. The use of defensive or aggressive tactics should be avoided at all costs in times of disagreement or dispute. Instead, you should work on keeping a cool head. Not using harmful language or making accusations against the other person is part of this. A constructive and non-confrontational dialogue can be maintained by careful word selection and the use of I statements to reflect one's own feelings and experiences. Conflicts can be avoided or resolved more easily by exercising patience. It's unlikely that a couple would agree on everything, but working together to identify common ground and win-win solutions can help get things done. This may entail being open to new ideas and viewpoints, coming up with ingenious solutions, and making compromises for the benefit of the partnership. How to build a solid identity and raise one's self-worth. Building a solid identity and fostering healthy self-esteem is an ongoing process that requires coming to terms with and celebrating one's unique qualities. Successfully overcoming obstacles, seizing opportunities, and connecting with others all require a solid foundation of self-awareness and self-confidence. The first step is to figure out what you care about. Think about the things that are important to you and that make you happy. Do things that help you feel like your true self, while also serving a greater good. Pursuing a passion, helping out with an issue that matters to you, or trying something new are all great ways to learn more about who you are. Building confidence requires time spent contemplating and analyzing oneself. Stop for a while, tune into your intuition, and examine your feelings and ideas without passing judgment. Realize that you, like everyone else, are not defined by your shortcomings and imperfections. Practice self-compassion and be as kind to yourself as you would be to a good friend. Acknowledge your successes and rejoice in any success, however small. Keep in mind that self-respect is not based on how well you measure up to others, but on how much you value and appreciate yourself. If you want to build your confidence, you need to surround yourself with positive, encouraging people. Make an effort to surround yourself with positive, supportive people. Put yourself in the company of people who encourage and push you to improve. Keep your distance from people and places that are negative influences that chip away at your sense of value. The internal conversations you have with yourself is just as significant as the influences from the outside world. Interrupt your negative inner monologue and start saying good things to yourself. Recognize and draw strength from the things you've done well. Exercise, eating healthy food, mindfulness, and doing things that make you happy and calm you are all forms of self-care that you should incorporate into your life. Recognizing that failures and difficulties are inevitable parts of life is crucial as you work towards building a solid sense of self and high self-esteem. Don't let your setbacks define you. Instead, use them to propel you forward in life. It's okay to be vulnerable and honest, even if you're worried about being judged. Realize that allowing yourself to be vulnerable demonstrates your bravery and strength rather than your lack thereof. Accepting your own and others' vulnerabilities paves the way for more authentic interactions and deeper bonds. Developing a sense of pride in oneself depends significantly on accomplishing one's own objectives. Clarify your goals and divide them into smaller, more achievable chunks. No matter how big or small, your successes will help you feel better about yourself and your talents. Recognize and reward yourself for the efforts you make towards your goals. Your life is unlike everyone else's, and making comparisons will only bring you down. Instead, work on bettering yourself as a person and revel in your successes without comparing them to those of others. Avoid the trap of comparison at all costs. Instead, take pride in your own unique path. Recognize that you are human and that it is normal to encounter failure occasionally. Be as patient and nice to yourself as you would be to a close friend or family member. Accept yourself as you are, learn from your mistakes, and let go of all self-criticism. Discovering and appreciating your individual hobbies and interests is essential as you progress along the path to building a solid sense of identity and healthy self-esteem. Take part in things that make you happy and let you be yourself. You can learn more about who you are and what makes you happy if you give yourself permission to try new things and uncover your latent skills. Developing a solid sense of identity also involves actively seeking to learn and improve oneself. Expose yourself to new ideas and information through reading books, going to seminars, having deep talks, and going on trips. When you adopt a growth mindset, you're able to expand your horizons. Make meditation and introspection part of your daily routine. Take some time out of your day to assess your well-being, reconnect with your thoughts and feelings, and assess how your values and priorities are holding you back. With this newfound insight, you may make decisions that are in line with who you truly are. Keep in mind that building a solid identity and raising one's self-worth is a lifelong endeavor that necessitates constant work and persistence. Treat yourself kindly as you go through life's ups and downs, and have faith in your capacity to develop into your full potential. Chapter 6. Self-Care Practices. Self-awareness is an essential part of self-care. Being self-aware means being aware of and accepting one's inner experiences. Individuals might start to see how codependent habits and tendencies have taken root in their lives by gaining a better awareness of themselves. This introspection lays the groundwork for making positive changes. Self-care from a physical perspective includes things like working out, eating well, and getting adequate sleep. It also entails taking care of one's health and maintaining a clean environment. Self-care on an emotional level is equally important in the fight against codependency. This involves giving one's feelings and emotions due consideration, rather than denying or ignoring them. Methods like writing in a notebook, going to counseling, and partaking in hobbies that offer one joy and contentment can help. Emotional self-care also includes setting boundaries in relationships so that one can safeguard their own emotional space and foster more positive interactions with others. Reading, acquiring new knowledge, and exploring one's creative potential are all vital. One other way to improve one's mental health is to practice mindfulness or meditation regularly. Strengthening one's sense of identity and ability to break free from destructive dependencies can be achieved by the practice of maintaining a level of mental clarity and actively seeking out new information and experiences. Self-care is beneficial since it raises one's sense of worth and confidence. When people do things that make them happy and give them a sense of purpose, they grow in confidence in their own abilities and strengths. As a result, reliance on others for approval and comfort decreases, leading to a stronger internal sense of identity. Self-care is an important factor in developing emotional toughness. It gives people the resources they need to deal with stressful situations and difficult emotions. People who have difficulty controlling their emotions and finding inner peace can benefit from engaging in activities that promote relaxation, such as taking calming baths, practicing deep breathing, or indulging in hobbies. When you take care of yourself, you help maintain a healthy mind and stable emotions. Stress, anxiety, and sadness can all be alleviated by making time for self-care activities that one enjoys. It's a way to relax and pamper yourself when you need a break from the stresses of life. Mindfulness-based practices like yoga and meditation can also aid in the development of a sense of calm and emotional stability. Chapter 7. Your emotional, mental, and physical health. Taking care of one's physical health includes fueling our bodies with healthy foods, drinking enough of water, and getting enough shut-eye. Physical health depends on consistent activity, be it something as pleasurable as dance, or as challenging as yoga, or as simple as a daily walk in the park. It can also be helpful to take frequent breaks from sitting and to incorporate movement into the day. Recognizing and working through our feelings is an important part of emotional self-care. Pursuing hobbies, spending time with loved ones, and expressing oneself creatively via activities like painting and writing are all great ways to boost one's mood. Gratitude and self-compassion are two more practices that can help people take care of their emotional health. Meditation, mindfulness exercises, and deep breathing methods are just some of the stress-busting and brain-refreshing activities that can be practiced during downtime from work or other commitments. Feelings of being unable to cope can be lessened by setting reasonable objectives and practicing efficient time management. Stimulating the mind and improving mental health can also be accomplished through lifelong learning activities such as reading, listening to podcasts, and taking up new hobbies. Time management is establishing healthy boundaries, learning to say no when required, and making time for oneself. Creating a schedule that leaves time for both personal pursuits and professional obligations is crucial. Taking part in activities like aromatherapy, listening to peaceful music, or taking a warm bath can all contribute to a sense of calm and well-being. Emotional and mental health can benefit from cultivating healthy relationships and hanging out with nice, encouraging people. A sense of community and belonging may flourish when people take the time to have meaningful discussions, develop their listening skills, and reach out to others when they need help. One of the most important parts of taking care of yourself is learning to know yourself better. It's important to regularly check in with ourselves, recognize our feelings, and pinpoint any destructive habits of thought or behavior so that we can work to change them. Journaling and other forms of introspective practice can help us better understand our own wants, needs, and values. How self-compassion can help you overcome codependency. Self-compassion is a transforming force that can help one overcome codependency. The need for other people to affirm our own sense of worth and value is a common root cause of codependency. When we lose ourselves in the pursuit of approval from others, we risk compromising our own needs and boundaries. As we continue to let ourselves and others down by not meeting impossible standards, we are trapped in a vicious cycle of shame and guilt. Self-compassion acts as a remedy, providing a kind and forgiving attitude towards oneself in times like these. It entails showing oneself the same compassion and care that we would provide to a close friend in a comparable situation. The deeply ingrained habits of codependence can be slowly broken down by practicing self-compassion. Recognizing our common humanity is a key component of self-compassion. That others feel suffering, make errors, and deal with complex emotions reminds us that we are not alone. Because of this insight, we may accept our flaws and let go of the pressure to live up to impossible standards. Instead of being hard on ourselves, self-compassion instructs us to be patient and kind while we work through our difficulties. Self-compassion allows us to feel secure enough to examine our feelings of inferiority and guilt. Feelings of worthlessness and the conviction that one is inherently imperfect are common causes of shame. Self-compassion is the key to confronting our shame and coming to terms with the truth that we are worthy of love and acceptance despite what we may have been led to believe. Self-compassion can lead us away from codependency by helping us set better boundaries and put ourselves first. Realizing our own worth and value apart from others' approval enables us to establish limits that are beneficial to our psychological well-being. Practicing self-compassion regularly can help us rewrite our story of shame and guilt. By liberating ourselves from the grip of codependency, we open ourselves up to the possibility of developing more fulfilling relationships, making decisions that are in line with who we truly are, and pursuing a path in life that is informed by self-acceptance and self-love. Self-compassion also gives us the strength to stop seeking approval from others. We learn to stop looking outside of ourselves for approval and instead discover it inside ourselves, in the form of self-acceptance. This shift in thinking frees us from the never-ending pursuit of approval and enables us to develop an intrinsic feeling of value that is independent of the approval of others. By practicing kindness to oneself, we stop stuffing or ignoring our feelings and instead give them loving, curious attention. We acknowledge that all feelings are genuine and that they can provide light on our experiences and wants. Self-compassion teaches us to be kind and accepting to ourselves, regardless of how we're feeling at any given moment. Self-compassion is also useful for negotiating the murky waters of self-blame. When we feel ashamed, it's easy to get stuck in a rut of blaming and criticizing ourselves, which only serves to reinforce our low self-esteem. But self-compassion enables us to deal with shame gently and compassionately. We come to understand that mistakes are an inevitable part of the human experience, and that they in no way reflect on our inherent value. Self-compassion is another tool for dealing with guilt since it can help us find our way to self-forgiveness and acceptance. We learn to recognize our shortcomings, accept responsibility for them, and look for methods to make amends rather than wallow in guilt and self-punishment. Through self-compassion, we may learn from our mistakes and move on. Self-compassion also makes us more resilient in the face of adversity. When things don't go as planned, instead of berating or punishing ourselves, we treat ourselves with compassion and understanding.